Yeah, I see you. Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, you can see the room anyways. Yeah.
You can
You
use
guys have,
the chair seat if you like. You'll be prominently.
do you guys have
Oh,
an
yeah. You're talking about
unsigned?
the. Do not. So, hello to people in the room. Actually, there's nobody in the room. Oh,
Yes,
there
Alex,
are.
but you sit in the corner, not in camera.
Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go.
We all sit together. We can't.
Somebody jump up to wave. I'm thinking I know Ulrich's around because he was in. Yeah, he was in DNS Op. So
Yeah.
There were a bunch of people in DNS Op. It was kind of cool.
yeah, and for us here, it was so bright and early. Um, okay. Anyway, I'm letting myself get distracted here. I got to get to.
Yeah, do the
I
slides.
know that there are more people coming. Ulrich said that he's going to join, and yeah. But they might be stuck with lunch because lunch is only an hour now. So
Yeah, well, it's 1 o'clock. So, Jim, shall I open the meeting then? And
Sure.
you do the upload of the presentation.
you don't
Yes,
go
I'm getting it. I'm typing in the title right now.
Oh,
I'll
sorry.
be there in a moment.
Alex.
The mobile app doesn't show the session for whatever reason. Anyway, or maybe it's just me. On the agenda, it's there, yeah. But on the mobile app, it's not there. So maybe the schedule and the. Yeah. Oh well.
Don't know if Meet Echo is listening. Is that something they can help with? Okay. You should check the meeting materials, Antoine, and make sure that you now see the data dictionary slides. Or do we have to ask Meet Echo to reload
No,
again for us?
You have to reload them from there now, and now see. So they're there now, and now we only have to wait when we do the next presentation to see if they're there. But okay, since we're already 2 minutes over time, let's open the meeting. This is the Registration Protocol Extensions Working Group. My name is Antoine van Schuren, and on the screen you have your co-chair, Jim Galvin. It's the 22nd of March today, which is a special day for me. Won't go further into detail. I turned 55 today.
I'm sorry, Antoine. I have to jump in. I knew there was. I wasn't catching on. I'm so sorry.
You would do the introduction, right?
That's
Anyway.
right. I have to do the introduction. We have 4 minutes here. We're not over time yet.
No.
Not over time yet. But it is Antoine's birthday today. This is a very special day for him. So it's a shame that you can't be in Vienna and go out and celebrate in style.
Yeah. Too bad. I'll be at the next one, right?
Yes. Yes, we'll definitely do our part then. Oh, look, we got some more people coming in the room. Isn't that lovely?
Yes. Okay. So it's well, they probably want to skip the note well, but they're still they should read it and they should adhere to it. I think everybody has read the note well. Everything you say here in the meeting room, on the mailing list, or in the corridors is subject to the IETF note well. So read it well. And of course, we one of the things as well is the IETF Code of Conduct guidelines, which I present on the screen now, which basically means treat colleagues with respect. Be aware that we're all here mostly for the single goal of contributing ongoing work to the group and the IETF for the best solution for the whole internet and not you in particular. And be aware of that and treat your colleagues with the same respect as you want them to treat you. that is the welcome introduction. Usually we say another word, and that is the way that we do document management, which means that we expect people to read and react to documents on the mailing list. Everybody that has once written a document will be happy to see contributions there. We also have the process within this working group that once a document is adopted, that we request to have a document shepherd right from the start of document adoption, and not at the end when we're going into the working group last call. So if you submit a document for adopting by this working group, we kindly request you to search for a document shepherd for your document, which is not the document author or any of the chairs of ADs. And for the people that want to volunteer being a document shepherd, it's a very good opportunity to learn everything about the processes of the IETF and get to know especially the process of how a document is going along in the publication process. So that was the welcome and introduction. The Notewell document management I just told you about. We have a few documents that are published since the last IETF. One of them is the secure authorization of information for transfer, RFC 9154, as you can see on the screen. And the other one is registry maintenance notification, also for EPP, RFC 9167. Congratulations, everybody with again publishing new documents. So that's off our plate. And then we still have some work in progress documents. First is finding the authoritative registration data for the RDAP service. This is, as you all know, an elevation to standard for one of the RDAP documents. It's very close to being published. It's still in the RFC editor queue. I didn't see any messages today, but expect this one to be published within, I think, the next days or week. Then another one is the use of internationalized email addresses in the EPP protocol, so internationalized email addresses. This document has passed working group last call, but we are, during working group last call, this document changed a few times, and we assume that this is for, that it didn't change anything substantial, which is why we want the document shepherd to state that on the mailing list and then do his write-up before we can submit this to the ISG. And I see James Gould in the queue there. James, go ahead. Do you want to say something? Can you unmute? Or should I? So James is in the queue, but he is having some audio issues. You're
I think I can hear. I think I can hear him in the background. It's very, very faint, though.
Yeah. It's
well, if you can type your comment in the chat room, Jim, we'll read it out for you. He's going to add a comment in the chat room. I see it over here.
Okay. I don't see Jody in the participants. List. I actually wanted to ask him a question, you know, how far he is with James said in the chat, you know, nothing material was changed to the draft. We know this. I mean, Jim and I have read the draft too. We think that there are no material changes made during last call. But since Jim and I need to be impartial here, the process is that the document shepherd is supposed to state that as an independent reviewer. And basically, we're waiting for that. And then when Jody has done that, he should also do the write-up as the document shepherd. But since Jody is not in the room, Jim and I will continue to harass him on that and to make sure that that he's doing that. But so if anybody is aware, if anybody's asking why this is taking so long, at the moment it's on the document shepherd. If it takes much longer, we might want to look for another document shepherd. But let's first give Jody a fair chance to do this. Then we change cues, Jim, and you'll do it from here on for the existing work, because I think the first one that's on the list is the simple registration reporting, and you are the one to state something about the progress of this document.
Yes, thanks. Let me first just put a chair hat on for a moment and remind us, we in the beginning, when we were talking about notes, we should have asked for people for the agenda is preloaded in the notes, the note-taking thing over here. We really would just like for folks to add a bullet whenever you hear an interesting point, and just put that in the notes. So we're just going to depend on the recording in the chat room here to keep us honest. And the note-taking facility is just for capturing actions and decision points. So if anyone could feel free to add that about their documents or any question, that would be great. And the note docs looks empty, he says. Note-taking tool. I'm looking in it now, and now why is it the agenda's not there? It was there the last time I looked. Honest. No, I'm at the Hedge Talk too, Rick, and I'm not seeing it in there either. Well, we'll get back to that. Let me just deal with my document. Oh, okay. Or did you just stick that there? Maybe somebody else stuck it there. Took a moment. Okay, I'm sorry. Simple registration. Yeah, simple registration reporting very quickly. We believe this document is ready for working group last call, and we're going to be asking for that on the mailing list after the IETF year. It's going to get added to a list of several documents here are on the cusp of working group last call. So we're ready to move that along as soon as other folks are ready. There really hasn't been much discussion with the document. And I see Jim with your hand up. Do you want to try again, Jim? And still not hearing you, Jim, if you're talking. Okay, well, back to you, Antoine, about registration reporting. We'll let Jim keep trying. Or if you put a comment in the chat, we'll deal with it there. Sorry, Jim. Not sure what's going on.
Yeah, James' audio seems to be very low. I don't know why that is. Could be a local issue. You said back to me, Jim? But you're on mute. Okay, next one is the reverse search capabilities, and that is Mario Lofredo. I think I saw you in there. I saw you earlier this week.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mario.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, since last meeting, I added the .it AddUp web client to the implementation status section. And following the feedback from Yazdik and Tom, I extended the query model to represent a reverse search based on any relationship between the AddUp object classes. And I changed the role path segment into a query parameter. Now I think that the document is in good shape and is substantially ready for to go into the working group last call. It includes two dependencies from two drafts, but they are informative references.
Okay, very well. So, conclusion for this document, you think it's ready for working group last call. We saw your
Yeah.
request for that, and we will follow up on that on the mailing list after this
Yeah.
IETF meeting.
Tom volunteered to share the document, so I think
And
that
the document
he
shepherds,
agree.
yeah, Tom is the document shepherd. We already discussed this with him, that this document has a quite long reputation, especially for the privacy consideration section. He's all aware of that, so we'll be expected to have this in working group last call in the next weeks. Then the third document, federated authentication using OpenID. Is Scott in the room or in the meeting? Scott, do you want to make comments for this one?
Sure, Antoine. I'm not in the room. I'm remote.
Yeah, like me.
Yeah. So this document changed extensively since we last met. It shifted from a token management approach that put that burden on the client to a token management approach that puts the burden on the server. And in doing that, I think it made the document much more acceptable, to people who are familiar with OpenID, OAuth, and how it's commonly implemented in web services. I've got a few more minor changes to make based on feedback received from the last update. But once I make those changes, I think we've got a document that's in really, really, really good shape. The only other thing I'd like to ask people to look at is the list of query purposes that are currently there. Those are part of a proposal for an IANA registry of query purposes. But if we agree that those purposes, cover the use cases we're familiar with, I think this document will be ready for working group last call with one more update.
That's really good news, Scott, because this has been on our plate for quite some time as well, of course. Does anybody have any questions to Scott about the changes or about the status of the document? If not, then we will move on to the next one, and that is JS Contact. And that's again Mario. Do you want to say anything about this one as well?
Yes. I just made only editorial changes since last meeting. So I corrected some needs. I updated references due to the transfer of the JS contact document from JMap to Calext, but nothing else. So I don't know if now it is the right moment, right time to ask for the working group last call, because just contact documents are expected to are scheduled to go into working group last call next July. So I don't think that there will be important changes in the next until July in this document. So I would suggest to go into working group last call, and I know that there is obviously some two dependencies from the JS contact documents. It seems to me normal. So I don't know what is the right procedure in this case. I never experienced before. So I trust in your experience to do what is the right track to follow.
Yeah. Thank you, Mario. Yeah, for folks that didn't get this yet, there are two normative references in this document to internet drafts, which of course are not allowed. And so we are actually waiting for the two other drafts, which are not in this working group, but in another working group on JS Contact, to be published together with this document in one go. And therefore, we have normative references to RFCs and not to internet drafts. We already discussed this with Murray, our area director. He says it won't be a problem. They will just queue up. And so we can do the working group last call, but be expected not to have them published until the other two documents are to be published as well. And I see Murray in the room. Murray, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, it's okay for me.
Now for Murray, I said Murray, not Mario.
Oh, sorry.
I have nothing to add. That sounds right.
Okay, so yeah, so that's the status of this document. It means that we can go into working group last call with this one, but it is in no hurry at all, since we have to do this before July, when the other two documents will also be published in the other working group. So I propose that since we have already 3 requests for working group last calls, we can do this one after the other 3. If you're okay with that, Mario, and because it will be lingering around anyway.
No problem at all.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mario. Then the next document, reacted fields in the RDAP response, and I don't see Jody nor Roger in the meeting, if I'm correct. I have to scroll down the whole. No, they're both not here. So let's deal with this one further on the mailing list. This one is not in working group last call yet, if I'm correct. There's still work in progress here to be done. So let's just keep that there. Then the next one is the registration data dictionary. I don't know, Jim, did you find the slides already? So if you can upload the slides for this one, and I will give the floor, I think, to Heather or Steve. Steve, I see in the queue. Yeah, there they are.
Yes,
Morning.
Heather will speak first and then me.
Okay. If Jim can put up the slides.
Or, yeah, I think I can request to share them as well if I hit the right button.
Yeah, they're in the meeting materials. Did you want to do it, Heather? You can go ahead.
Yeah, but then we have to stop sharing slides first, right? Let's see if I. Yeah. Okay, so I stopped sharing slides.
Okay. And let's see if I hit this button and this button. Did that share slides?
Not yet.
Let's try again.
But Heather, you and I are going to switch off. Maybe if Jim could run the slides, we'd both be in better shape.
True. It's not sharing. It's opening them up for me, but it's not sharing them. So.
Yeah, and they're not in the preloaded slides yet. Normally, before the meeting, we have preloaded slides, but since these were not in the data tracker yet at the beginning of the meeting, they're not in the preloaded slides as well. Let's see if I can do something here.
Yeah, can we ask MeetEcho to reload the preloaded slides? And I want to give Rick a chance to go back to the previous document and say a word while we're waiting for that. He wrote a comment in the chat room, which is kind of important. I'd like to give him a chance to speak that.
Permissions, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, thanks. So yeah, Rick Wilhelm, PIR, just for the wearing my RDAP working group chair hat, just letting everybody know what I said in the chat there, that the ICANN RDAP working group is working on modifying the ICANN RDAP profile so that RDAP responses are allowed to use JS contact and are not required to use JCard. This will probably make a lot of folks in the room that are not big fans of JCard pretty happy. So we're allowing flexibility there in the response mechanism. And so we're kind of hoping that would, it's not required that they use JS contact, but it certainly allows that optionality. And so we're hoping that we're going to start to see some variety in implementations and an evolution in the in JS contact implementation. I'm probably going to learn some things in that. And so happy to take any questions about that, but and also a lot of shout out to Mario on that. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Rick. And I now have, thank you, Meet Echo. I now have the data dictionary slides. So over to you guys.
Outstanding. So we're going to assume that folks have had a chance to read the data dictionary. Jim, could you go to the next slide, please? So when last we left our humble explorers, since IETF 112, the draft was accepted as a working group item. Thank you all very much for that. For my own purposes of keeping track of feedback, I did go ahead and create a GitHub repository. Not suggesting changing working group process on how you normally handle drafts. This was as much for me personally as anybody else, but it's there if anyone would like to follow along, if they would find that easier. What changes we've made as a result of the feedback that came for the call to make this a working group item, we updated the abstract. One of the big points was we really don't want to set policy with this draft, so we tried to make that clear. We updated several of the definitions to remove the normative reference to the EPP spec. The general data element specification, we made a note that local interpretation is expected for any legal issues, and this in no small part touched on questions of, legal, natural person, whatnot. What is the local definition? Because the data dictionary isn't trying to set that. There were several areas that could inform policy just by how they were defined. And for all of those, we put the definition to be determined. We also did to be determined for any elements that had questions about, well, what format are you choosing? So for like date or name or address, those are always sticky to define well. So those are also TBD. And given the previous changes, we moved several items from normative references to just informative references because they're no longer fundamentally required. Next slide, please. There were a couple things that we were able to just close in terms of requests that people made as part of the call for adoption. One was to change the title from the DNS registration DNS data dictionary to the registration data dictionary. So that's been done. And the removal of the references to EPP. So those two things, at least, I created issues for them solely so I could close them, which felt really good. Love checking things off the list. The GitHub shouldn't be private. I will double check that as soon as I hand off to Steve, who gets the next slides.
Thank you very much, Heather. Let me just emphasize a point or two. This work arose out of work that Heather and I and others have been involved in, where we realized that we were making references or making lists of data elements, and that there are other places in the ecosystem where there are references to the equivalent data elements, and that there was no common place to refer to those. So this is sort of an emergent aspect of the work. And the intent, which I want to emphasize very strongly, is that this is not intended to influence any of the substantive developments going on in these areas. It's simply an attempt to gather the terminology that's used and provide it as an available source of commonality across the system. I know that's a question that keeps coming up as to whether or not we're trying to change things that have been developed or influence existing things. So we're just trying to put something on the table that would be a useful building block for either existing or future systems. And of course, we'll see how that goes. So here's some of the comments that came back. And the first one I think I've just spoken to, that this documents various terms, but is not expected necessarily to be in complete agreement. That was a suggestion. So we'll see how this goes, but we've been trying to strip out any of the things that are biased in one direction or another. Another concern is that definitional nuances might be lost. Many words very policy loaded, can be difficult to capture a standard definition for them. That's true, and we'll, as I said, we're trying hard to be as neutral and as sort of vanilla as possible in these definitions. A concern about whether there are implied policy decisions. The comment was, it says it's merely a dictionary, but then it goes on to make very clear policy decisions, e.g. in section 2.30. And by defining elements, the existence of these fields as defined by this data may create foundational bedrock to build an argument to support by parties as to why, in the presence of the definition of these fields, the information is not being captured. Well, I'm not sure what more I can say with respect to the first of those things, but with respect to the second, that's an interesting and in some ways quite insightful comment, that just by putting those definitions in there, it provides ammunition for parties who want to argue, well, it's defined, therefore it must be used. No doubt there will be instances of that kind of dialogue, but I hope we're making it clear in here that that is a separate and an explicit decision that has to be made by each and every group as to whether they want to use those data elements. And one of the things that I think will sort of make that case is that there will be plenty of data elements that are defined that simply will not be used. There would be strong agreement not to use it in a particular application. So I think there will be it'll be easy to push back in those situations where somebody is trying to say, well, it's there, therefore you have to use it. And the answer is no, it's got to be much stronger than that. Next slide, please. Jim? There we go. A question about the use of A-label formats. International version U-label seems to be more inclusive. I actually am going to punt. I remember listening to some discussion about that, but I realize I don't have the full picture of that. There are some others in the room here who might be able to speak to that. Feel free to speak or chat or whatever. And with respect to the second bullet, is the goal to describe the semantics of data element, also specified syntax. In the last case, we need to specify Unicode normalization. So I would expect that this will come out in the back and forth that we're going to have as we move forward on all of this. Nobody's speaking to the A-label format issue. Next slide.
I think I saw Jim in the queue.
Yeah, Jim Gould had his hand up briefly, but I will also comment that the issue in my mind about A-label versus U-label is just that you probably have to have both, because even in the GTLD space where you get policies from ICANN, they only apply at the TLD level. And some limited application at the second level, but you can't control anything else down the tree. So, right. You know, those are just issues. So you probably have to have both. That's all.
Thank you. And you mentioned that there was a hand up.
Yeah, it's James Gould, but we're trying to see if his audio works. So can you try again, James?
Can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can hear something.
something.
Yeah.
I think kind of yellow. Okay, so yeah, no, I actually want to speak to the second bullet, not the first one, because I'm a little bit confused of the purpose of this draft, because it has a mix of syntax. Some of the data elements do, some of them don't. And then if they do have data element syntax definition, what do we use that for? So if we're using these data elements in the protocols, they may not match. So is the intent to try to normalize the syntax as well in this draft? So my recommendation is to remove the syntax and just make them data element definitions as opposed to trying to mix it in. So just want to speak to that one.
Good comment. Noted. I don't think we're going to resolve it on the spot here, but we'll make a point of having some dialogue on the mailing list. All right, next slide. Suggestion clarifying IANA considerations clarify that new data elements will be created for use across the entire domain system as opposed to describing how specific data element is populated for a given domain. And I have to add quickly that although this arose out of work that we're doing in the domain name system, it applies also to data elements for address registrations and potentially for other situations. So we need to make that a bit clearer. The word domain there might seem like it means domain names, and I think we'll pull that out a little bit. Thank you. Next slide. All right, several next steps. I need text. Oops, what happened here?
Yeah, sorry, Jim Gould had his hand up, and I wonder if he took it down because we changed slides. Just wanted to be fair quickly to what's going on.
Change slides. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Did you want to speak to this issue?
Different issue I want to bring up. So it's just kind of find the right time to do it. Thank you.
Oh, wrong button, Jim.
Yeah, wrong button. Just a moment.
Been there, done that.
Yep. And there you go.
Excellent recovery. All right, so a handful of next steps. Obviously, we want to fill in the TBDs and identify any terms that are missing, although my strong expectation is that this is a live process, that once we put this to bed and get the registry up and running, there will then be additional data items that will get added at some rate. Won't be a torrent, but might be a little trickle. But there will be ones queued up, and there'll have to be a process assigned to that. And most important, we need a document shepherd. We need a volunteer. I don't see a whole bunch of hands going up. Please, please, please. We need somebody who serves the proper role of a document shepherd, has the right time, commitment, neutrality, and insight. Well, if you don't volunteer, we're going to come around and find you. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And yeah, what the document shepherd is concerned, please volunteer indeed also on the mailing list, or write directly to the document authors or the chairs, and we can make that happen. Okay, any questions? I see James in the queue. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I have two items of feedback. One is associated with the choice of the data elements. Since I'm seeing new elements that I'm unfamiliar with that are TBD, and I really don't see a large set of data elements that exist in other RFCs related to registration data, like the data escrow RFC. So it may be worthwhile to review those RFCs and try to pull in data elements that are applicable. A second item, and I believe this also applies, this is what I was trying to say for the report draft, is making sure that the data elements follow a consistent naming convention. I'm seeing a mix of abbreviations versus underbars, uppercase versus lowercase. And I believe it would be good to formally define the convention and to follow it consistently in the draft. That's it. Thank you.
Those are two very, very good suggestions. It's certainly data elements that are defined in various RFCs we ought to include. There will be other data elements that are coming up in some of the work we're doing and in other people's works that will not be familiar to everybody, which is at least in part of the motivation for this. But with respect to covering those things that have been used in other documents, that's an extremely good suggestion. And on your other suggestion of using consistent naming and naming convention is also quite appropriate. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Thank you, Steve. Gustavo, you're next. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful, thanks. So I have two general comments. One is, I mean, as most of the participants in this group, at some point in our careers, we have to implement a registry or register system. And over time, I learned that there are going to be conflicts because the registry is going to be dynamic, obviously, and then the contracts, local law, all of these things are also dynamic. So I was wondering if the draft should say something like, if there are some conflicts between definitions between local law, contracts, or policy and the draft and the dictionary itself, you need to go and look for your own like legal advisor for any kind of help. I mean, I learned over my career that when there are conflicts, I should try to go and look to the legal advisor of the company to understand what should I do, right? So it's kind of a suggestion, just maybe say there to the techies, hey guys, if you find some conflicts, go on and find some kind of legal uh, uh, advice or something like that. And the second comment is, I think that the draft mentions that at some point, once the registry is available, the definitions could change, right? So I think this IANA registry should support some kind of versioning. So if a definition change, it would be nice to know what was the definition at certain point in time. Like at this point in time, the definition was this, and then on this specific point in time, it changed to this other thing, because that also could help in case that there are some legal whatever things with legal stuff. So those are my comments.
Yeah, very interesting. Are you suggesting that the registry should contain the history of the definitions, even if they've changed over time?
Yes, I think that's what I'm suggesting. Because normally when you go to an IANA registry, you can see like the current version, right? But you don't have like a version in, I mean, usually, right? I don't know if in the IANA registries we have an example of a registry with versioning, but some kind of versioning should be there, or notes or something that says this changed from this to this at this point in time.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't have any direct experience with that in this context. Are there people, has this come up in other situations where an IANA registry has revision history as part of the registry? Surely there is someone who is expert and knows all of that.
Well, I wanted to make a comment, and that is not, my chair had off for a moment, but isn't it in the academic world, the definition is supposed to be a definition and never changes anywhere in the future? That's the definition of a definition.
Well, you wouldn't want it to change very often.
Yeah. I see somebody at the queue in the room, by the way, but you have to register in Meet Echo first before you can speak. Otherwise, I cannot open the queue, right? Jim, you're in the queue as well, making a comment about this. I'll lower my hand.
Yeah. I think, in my mind, as I think about this, for this document, I don't know the answer specifically to what IANA does. I'm not aware personally of any history being maintained in IANA registry, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert. There's just way too much going on there. So that's a question that we could certainly ask if we think it's useful. What does occur to me, though, is that there was a question earlier, and I'm sorry, I forget who asked the question. Oh, Michelle is here. And she's saying in the chat room that there are examples of versioning within IANA registries. Not many, but she recalls a few. She'll have to find some examples for us. She's offering to do that, which is very kind. So thank you, Michelle, for that. But the other thing that occurs to me is there's a question earlier, Steve. I'm sorry, I forget who asked the question. But a comment about whether or not there's any concern about contracts and regulations and laws that might impact what an element looks like. And there was a related question about should we care more about the semantics or the syntax of the element. Seems to me this fits into the same category. Maybe it's appropriate to take a little bit of a step back here and just think about where we're trying to go with this document. I shouldn't say we. The working group, where you want to go with this document, and what you want to do there. I don't know if that's a proper thing to do. So I just leave the question. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the devil's always in the details. General attitude here is that we're not trying to solve conflicts so much as provide common terminology where common terminology is sensible. And then if there are issues about how it gets used or what it means or something, that those get pushed up a level into the proper venues, but not this one. This is intended to sit underneath, if you will, any debates about policy-related things or legal issues. But inevitably, I can envision situations where the mere fact of trying to make the separation between what is commonly understood and where are the local interpretations could lead to some interesting things. For example, and I'm just making this up as I go here, pretty much, that if we ask, if we have, there was a reference to a data element that defines whether or not the registration is for a legal person or for a natural person. A question that an attorney might ask is, where is the jurisdiction for that decision? That is legal versus natural in which jurisdiction? And so one that might force the addition of yet another data element or some way of adding that to the dictionary. In which case, I would say this exercise turns out to be useful in bringing subtle things to the surface that are otherwise implicit. But that's downstream a bit.
And I have to interrupt you here a bit, Steve, because we're getting a little bit short on time. We have 3 more people in the queue, and we have 1 minute for them. So, Eduardo, go ahead, if you can make it quick.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. This is Eduardo Alvarez, just following up on the topic of this historical information or on IANA registries. One, I guess not quite exactly an IANA registry, but the IDN repository, the repository of IDN tables uses some form of tracking of historical versions. Considering that archived IDN tables are also available as published by IANA, maybe that's one approach that can be seen as one example.
Okay, next, Jonathan. Do you have a quick remark? Jonathan?
I do. I think I muted myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So I have to put on my hat as representing registrars inside the ICANN world, despite my personal opinions about this, which I think is a good idea. There are some concerns about some of the fields being collected or how they're defined for the registrar information. And the the hope was one, that registrars, there's a lot of variation in what information may or may not be collected at registrars based upon their business model. And the presence of fields may beg the question among those who are data collectors as to why something maybe is or is not there among those who might request data that is where they're seeking to get all the data they possibly can. And I think there's some time and thought needs to be put into what fields maybe should or shouldn't be there. And I'm just that's a collection of feedback from among registrars. And again, I'm stating that out of responsibility, despite maybe my personal feelings on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Jasdip, you have a comment, go ahead, and then Steve can perhaps give a closing remark.
Hi, this is Jasdeep Singh, Erin. So one suggestion, this is for Steve and Heather. This is primarily right now sounds DNR centric, but if you have RAR side, so one suggestion would be that the starting point could be, this is just an input. If you look at RDAP, that is one common protocol between DNRs and RARs. And it defines data structures pretty well, covering the processes for both types of registries. And of course, EPP then specializes that from the provisioning angle further. So one suggestion would be that to help capture the right set of data elements, that could be one of the good starting points. So just wanted to suggest that, especially
Okay, thank you, Jasdeep. Steve, one closing remark, 5 seconds.
Thank you. And we need a document, Shepard.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then we will move on with the agenda, and we have one more presentation, which is new work. Jim, can you bring up the slides? And it's Mario who's going to present something about EPP over HTTP.
Yeah, but I don't know if it would be better to leave the time for James' presentation, James' comment about RDAP redacted.
So are you saying you don't do your presentation, but have James's comment? No, James said you go ahead, Mario.
Okay.
You can make the comment on the mailing list as well, of course.
Okay. No problem. This is presentation about a recent document we have submitted as a joint proposal by .it and .pl. A few introductory words about this document. It doesn't aim to be a revolutionary proposal. It just aims to define the rules for implementing APP over HTTP. Next slide, please. What could be the motivation of implementing APP over HTTP? HTTP is loosely coupled with the network, so you don't have to deal with all the low-level details typical of TCP programming. It provides a well-known client-server communication model that is supported by largely by all the software platform available. Its simplicity reduces the development time and it must be noted that most of the burden of handling the connection, the HTTP session, and the request and the response is normally done by an application server. With regard to the speed gap between HTTP and TCP, HTTP has become faster version by version, and now we can say that that gap is not so large as in the past. About load balancing, we can say that load balancing can be more easily implemented at layer 7 than at layer 4, because most of the load balancer are software, are instead load balancer at layer 4 are more dependent on the hardware, and as correctly pointed out by Gavin in his feedback on the mailing list, if the migration to cloud is the future, migrating an HTTP server to cloud requires less effort than a TCP server. Next slide, please. So how APP messages are exchanged in this proposal? The client must use the HTTP post method to issue an APP command, and the server receiving a request return the APP response in the response body, setting the content length either to indicate the byte length of the entity body. No APP message information must be issued through any other part of the request or the response. So there is a clear distinction between the application level and the transport level. Next slide, please. Session are implemented, APP session are implemented by using the mechanism described in RFC 6265. A server receiving an EPP login command must use the set cookie response header to send a token, also known as a session ID, that the client will use to in the future request within the scope of the APP session. The name of the cookie attribute is not relevant, and it depends on the implementation. This is an example of a set cookie attribute setting the session ID and the use and the client server using this the session ID in the subsequent request. Next slide, please. The session ended by the client by submitting the APP logout command. A server receiving APP logout command must end the APP session, invalidating the session after having issued the response. Obviously, APP session that are considered inactive for more than a server defined period can be ended by the server itself. Next slide, please. The log command does not is the only command that can be issued outside an APP session, together with obviously with the APP login to start the session. In such a case, the server must return the greatest response without starting a session. For example, it can return no cookie at all, or it can return an expired cookie. Obviously, a client may issue the log command within an APP session, for example, to keep it alive. Next slide, please. Just to emphasize the clear distinction between the application layer and the transport layer, there is no mix between the return codes provided by HTTP and EPP. So each HTTP error codes must be used for signaling only HTTP request failure, and APP error codes must be used for signaling APP command failure. So this means that the HTTP return code 200 is used for both successful and unsuccessful APP requests. Next slide, please.
We have 1 more minute, Mario.
Okay, we have 2 implementation. They are stable. They are live implementation. They have been working for many years, more than a decade. Next slide, please. And 2 words about the security consideration. HTTP over TLS must be used to protect sensitive information while in transit. Servers are recommended to implement additional measures to verify the client. There are some measures suggested in the slide. Servers may require clients to present valid X.509 digital certificate issued by recognized certification authority. Next slide, please, the final. And there are some other possible additional security measure to protect, to prevent the session ID to be from being hijacked, and servers are finally recommended to control the number of simultaneous OpenEPP session and HTTP connection to mitigate the risk of resource starvation. There is 2 other slides, but I would like to stop here because they are about load balancing, and this it is described in an appendix of the document.
Okay, thank you, Mario. We are running a bit out of time.
The final note, sorry, is that the authors would like to ask the working group to consider this document for the adoption.
And then please take that to the mailing list, Mario, of course.
Okay. Yes.
Three,
I will be.
if you can make
I will
it.
do.
Yes. So this is Ulrich from the Swedish Registry. I have a super minor comment. I think the document should be called EPP over HTTPS. And then to HTTPS, I want to say that the document should reference the from the security considerations from the security working group about which TLS version to use and which TLS ciphers and so on, because that I think is not an expertise of our working group. And lastly, I have you reference HTTP3 in the document, but HTTP3 allows you to basically have several sessions inside the same connection, and something of that mapping would at least be talked about in the document.
Okay, thank you. Gavin?
Yeah, thank you, Gavin Brown, Centralink. Ulrich already said what I wanted to say about HTTP3 streams, but I did want to note in security considerations, it makes the draft makes IP-based access control and mutual TLS optional, which is a regression from the current specification for APP over TCP or APP over TLS, where they are mandatory. I think I've no particular objection to that, but I think it needs to be noted in the draft that there is a difference there in the security profile of the 2 different transport protocols.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. And then final remark from Jim. Jim, go ahead.
Thank you, Antoine. There are far too many Jims in this working group. My name is Jim Reed.
Yeah.
I'm just violently opposed to cookies in any possible shape or form. I just don't like them, and I don't understand why you would need to complicate the session for an APP with having cookies in there and deal with the issues of stale cookies and refreshing cookies and all that stuff. Why not just eliminate it? What benefit do we get for an APP session that has cookies? I don't see the need for it.
Can I answer?
Yes, you can.
No, firstly, I would like to answer to Ulrich. We decided the title of the document that is compliant to the name of RFC 5734. So the name of that document is APP over TCP, not over TLS. So in the same way, I entitled the document APP over HTTP and not or APP over HTTPS. But in the document is stated that TLS is required. So why we use the cookies? Because we adopt a standardized method to map an application session to an HTTP session. This is the standard way we adopt. We have been adopting for many years. So there is no way, there's no problem in refreshing the cookies, because it's something that library supporting HTTP requests and responses and sessions are accustomed to manage. So you don't need to make to implement nothing special, because you need only for the client, for example, to enable cookies management and that's it. So I think that this is a simple way to manage the session for an APP client. And
Well, thank you, Mario. In the sake of time, we really have to close here. In the form of cookies, just because people are standardly using it doesn't mean that it's good to use them. So we may take that discussion on the mailing list, Jim, because we really ran out of time. We're 10 minutes late.
Okay, thanks, Mario.
Yeah. And with that, we come to the end of our agenda. If there are any other business, this is a last call for any other business, if we can do it in 1 minute. And I don't see any hands. And with that, I think we ran a little bit over time. That was not expected, but it was a good session. See you all on the mailing list, and let's continue the discussions there. And with that, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you all, and thank you for who was taking the minutes, Jim?
There are a variety of people. Rick Wilhelm and I were mostly putting notes in the note taking.
Okay,
so we got
thank
some bullet
you for
points.
taking the minutes, and let's see each other on the mailing list, and hopefully soon next time. I think that will be Philadelphia, right?
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yep. In
Okay.
July. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.